Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to In Time. My name is Nicholas Lamar Soutter, and with me today is Courtney Stewart. Courtney, how are you? I'm doing good, thank you. I'm yeah, doing well. It's been a little crazy with the family, but everyone's going stir crazy. So no, but things are going good. We do have a lot of news that's going on, and rather than I think try to cover it here, we're gonna do a overtime, probably I don't know in maybe an hour after the end of the show. We're going to do an overtime. We'll cover a lot of the breaking news and get everybody up to date with what's going on in the rest of the world. But in the meantime, today we have on Christopher Maute, and we're going to be discussing a topic which, as I understand it, you've been really looking forward to this one. Yeah, well, he and I have been speaking a bit, and he's a good guy, and I think it's going to be a good show. So, thank you all for joining us. And am I really? They're saying Courtney is muted. Um, Courtney is muted, and Maute. Well, Maute's not up yet, but let's bring Christopher out here and see what happens. I don't. But oh, we'll reset that, and then there's always something, isn't there? Uh, yeah, and Christopher, how are you? We should have Christopher now, and we'll see. Very good. All right. So now they're saying. Let me just double check here. I was working with NDI, which is a broadcast tool that I would very much like to use and would make things a lot easier. But apparently maybe the NDI has messed with the sound, which would be unfortunate. This says that the sound is coming through. Oh, we had this difficulty earlier. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to reset. Um, I'm going. Oh, all right. So I've reset the desktop capture, which hopefully is. It sounds like they can hear me just fine, but and it's yeah, show about communication. Okay. Um, so I have reset the audios, and with any luck, there's a little bit of a lag. With any luck, they will tell us. So we had this problem actually earlier, and I don't know why. It may be also an OBS update. I have to just reset the audio when we start. It says that you guys are coming in fine, but for whatever reason, I mean, I have audio levels for both of you, but it's not coming through. So this happened. This happened on another show, and my hope is okay. So, guys, can you hear
Check
them
1 2.
now? Yeah, he's gonna do his sound
Check
check
check 1 2 2. Check 1 2. Check it out. Check it out.
there. I've got the sound levels here. OBS says that the sound is coming in, but for whatever reason. So what I'm going to do is just give it another second, and then let's Oh, you know what we can do here?
So yep, apparently they heard me.
Oh, okay. I don't see anything in the voice chat. So
Everybody
Marty's good.
good?
Okay, if they can hear him, they should be able to hear both of you now.
Very
Checking me.
nice.
Anybody
Yep.
hear me? I can't
All
read
right.
along, so they're gonna have to tell me.
All right. Well, good. Well, so it sounds like you're both good, and I do
Okay.
sincerely apologize for the sound issues. It says everything's green here. I just reset the sound, even though it said it was okay, and that seems to have done it. We had that same problem yesterday. So we have on today Christopher Maute. Mr. Maute, how are you?
I'm doing quite well. I'm just typing a big fat thank you into the side chat because that's the best part about having a community that gives a shit about everything working. They're like, hey, I can't hear this, I can't hear that, fix this, do that. And it sounds demanding, and it is at the time, but the goal is to, the show must go on, right? So that's awesome that you have people that are like, hey, no, do this, fix this, tweak that. So I'm doing really well. I'm doing really well. So I definitely wanted to put a hell yeah, thank you to everybody in the chat. Yeah, I'm doing quite well. Let's see. You wanted me to talk about like me and things and stuff.
Well, yeah. So let's for people who don't know who you are, let's introduce you. So
I will
tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah.
I will assume that most people don't know who I am. So I am a bass player who is super curious about science, specifically about the field of psychology, and my academic adventure led me towards getting a master's in education in a program whose label was Science and the Public. And it was an informal science education master's level program. It was online, I'll readily admit that. It was through the University of SUNY Buffalo. And it had an affiliation, although not quite on paper, and that's a long story. We should have another hang about my experience as a visiting research fellow at the Center for Inquiry, which is a secular humanist think tank. I'll put it that way. And they are affiliated or were affiliated with the SUNY Buffalo. And that was the program that they kind of helped shape that I graduated from. So science communication is an interest of mine. I am a laboratory manager at the Monell Chemical Census Center in Philadelphia. And I am the lab manager for Dr. Pamela Dalton. Pamela Dalton is a cognitive psychologist who is interested in studying how perception is malleable in many different ways. She cut her teeth, so I'm going to start bragging about my boss for a hot second, but then I'm going to get back to, because like it's so relevant. But yeah, just let me brag about my boss for a hot second. She cut her teeth on olfactory research. Oh, we studied the psychology of the sense of smell. Excuse me. And she cut her teeth on this topic by having people go into a room that had the exact same odor at the exact same concentration for the exact same period of time, but she just primed them in 3 different ways. So she shaped expectation for each of them. And for one, she didn't really tell anything other than, you're going to be in a room that has an odor. Another group of people, and this is testing one person at a time, randomly assigned to each of the groups that are getting these instructions. Another group is told, hey, this is the byproduct of a chemical waste plant, but you'll be safe because it's just a low exposure at a low, short period of time. Another set of people were told, hey, this is a new product that is being tested for aromatherapy purposes. So just a positive expectation prime, a negative expectation prime, and then like a neutral non-control prime absolutely shaped the way that they perceived what they were doing. And how we were able to measure that was, and I say we, it's my lab because I've been there for so long, but this was done before I actually got there. The way that they were able to measure the difference was before they went into the room and before they primed them, they had them fill out a questionnaire about health symptoms. How much of a headache do you have? How much of a stomach ache do you have? And they had, things that they were genuinely concerned about that you might be suffering if there was something bad in the room. And then they had some sham health symptom ratings. Had them fill that out, both before and afterwards. And then during, they had them make ratings of like, how intense do you think the odor is if you perceive one? How annoying is it? How unpleasant is it? Yada, yada, yada. After all is said and done, it's exactly what you would expect, but here's the beauty of psychology as a science. It is the attempt to study the mind without getting overrun by the trappings of the mind. So it seems like common sense that this would happen, but just anecdotal evidence isn't good enough because that's a naive psychology that we want to overcome, which has a lot to do with the science communication that we're going to be getting into. Yep. Don't think I didn't do this on purpose. So Uh, what we saw was the health symptom ratings before people went into the room were all very similar. But when they came out, the people that were negatively primed had an increase in ratings of toothache and headache and stomach ache and nausea and dizziness and all these other things, because they were not only rating whether they had them, but how much of it they had on a 5-point Likert scale. And not only was there a difference in that, for the positive group, the health symptom ratings actually went down, as if the, like something therapeutic had occurred, and the people that were given the more neutral bias landed somewhere in the middle. As well, while they were in the room, the intensity of the odor was rated as more intense for the negatively primed group, which makes sense because when you're in an unfamiliar environment, an unfamiliar odor, we do have kind of like a survival negative prime in the way that we perceive things. So that totally makes sense. But as far as unpleasantness of the odor itself, which was like, pilot tested to be as neutral in odor and unfamiliar in odor as possible, they rated the odor as very unpleasant in a way that the people with the positive prime were like, yeah, this is very pleasant. I actually like this. Right? Keeping in mind, same odor, same concentration, same amount of time. So that's my boss. That's the lab that I work in, and I've been working there for 20 years. So because I work in the lab that I do, and because there are claims about things like aromatherapy, and because in my journey, my academic journey, I went through, I went to graduate school also. This is a side story that touches on this, for music therapy. I'm also aware of all these weird claims about the Mozart effect and stuff like that, right? All of these I see as pseudoscience. Aromatherapy is pseudoscience. The Mozart effect is pseudoscience. But it's difficult to explain why, because it's easy to bumper sticker the wrong interpretation. It's very difficult to disentangle that bumper sticker into what is actually correct. There might be a kernel of truth in there, but just the wrong spin gives all these connotations about why it is the way that it is. That is part of the miscommunication. And so I'll use that as the bow at the end of this, wrapping it up. That's one of the reasons why I'm interested in science communication, because in my academic history, in my occupational history, I've come across an attempt to explain a part of what I do that is popular and wrong. And I've always been like, man, how do I get around this? Like, how do I communicate this without bludgeoning them with how wrong they are? Because that's an instinct I think that we have that is its own bias. So that's who I am, and that's how I got into what we're talking about.
All right. So what would you say is, and there are a couple of certainly a couple of examples I would like to touch on, because I see in particular for me it's the news is what interests me the most, is when a scientific paper comes out and then it gets misrepresented in the news, probably usually for brevity, and then that usually causes a whole cascade of problems, which I'd certainly like to discuss. But for you, what do you think is the biggest problem in science communication?
Well, the biggest problem is that science communicators are responsible for fitting 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. That's the home run answer right there. That's exactly what the problem is. Because you want to be able to bumper sticker it, like I say, like I purposely verb that noun. Bumper stickering something is a good thing. Let me rephrase that. Bumper stickering something can be a good thing. The downside is oversimplification. When you oversimplify something, then you're without realizing it, assuming good faith and a charitable interpretation, you're giving off certain connotations that the audience is going to infer about why it is the case that it is. And I don't know if I can think of a specific example about that, but when it comes to super complicated topics, just touching the top line, how about this? When reviewing data that there are decades of information about, and the newspaper only reports on yearly averages, and they make a graph of that, they're framing the data in a way that might not show all the details that the public would see if they showed a week by week or month by month version of the same exact data. That granular level of resolution would expose a different pattern than you would assume from the linearity, right? You would see a discontinuity in the data that would show a pattern of cycles that doesn't exist in the linear version that is just the yearly average. So using that as an example, I think it's one of the main problems is just like, fitting 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag, not oversimplifying, and making sure that what you're presenting doesn't give off assumptions that don't exist. And in the example that I gave, it was the assumption of linearity where actual discontinuity exists.
Or one of the big ones that I like, correlation and causality. And so let me give a couple of examples that I
sure. These are
like.
Fun. There are websites dedicated to this.
Oh Jesus, yeah. Oh well, the ice cream one's the one I
about Nicolas
like
Cage.
Oh yeah, that's Nicolas Cage is a good one. But in terms of, so I mean, for me, one of the things is I'm a huge fan of science, and I think scientists do on occasion say, okay, we at this point believe things work a certain way, and then it turns out it doesn't. But it is a process, and it's constantly evolving, and the goal is to constantly get closer to the truth. But I think there's a perception that scientists make claims all the time, which they actually rarely make claims, and that those claims are often wrong. So here are a couple of examples that the news is, in fact, I think, often the culprit for many of it. So let me give a couple. There was one finding about 10 years ago that alcohol actually can be beneficial to the heart because, or has a positive effect, I should say, and that effect was that it relaxes the heart muscle. That was what they found. Now, the news came out and said scientists have now found that alcohol is good for the heart. Well, that's not what they said. It does have one positive effect. 2 years after, actually not even 2 years after that, I think it was only about 8 months after that, there was another study that said that the overall effect of alcohol as essentially a poison and the damage that it does to the heart muscles outweighs the benefits of relaxing that muscle. And then they eventually did reach the conclusion that alcohol actually is not good for you. And like, well, scientists are changing their mind now. They said earlier that it was good. Well, no, they never said that. What the study found was that there was a positive benefit to it. They did not reach conclusions about the overall benefit. But
even if they did say that, there is a way to very graciously mention that is the charm of science. It's self-correcting. It's not that it's making a claim that it wants to last forever in history as correct. It just wants to plant a flag in the sand so that as things progress, we can point back to it if we realize that we've gone astray.
That's a good analogy.
So that is the crux of science communication, right? So I think that you and I have talked about this, Nick, and I know that and if I haven't talked to you directly about this, I'm sure I've talked to you about the fact that I talked to my buddy Drag about this.
And it's the idea of Dragnot, I can't pronounce the second, Silvis, is that correct?
Yes. Dragnot Silvis.
All right.
Yeah, Drag.
Yep.
And it's this idea of the deficit model of science communication, which pretty much dictates that, like, I totally understand why you think what you think. It's because you don't understand it the way that I do. Or another way to put it is, there is a deficit in your understanding that I can correct because I understand it more completely. And so here are the facts. Now that you have the facts, I've unlocked the Gnostic key that permits you to now no longer be an adept and rise to the level of intelligence that I have, right? Because that's how it comes across, this deficit model. And it's a knee-jerk reflexive way of doing it. Oh, you just don't understand it. Let me explain, right? Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. But here's the funny part. So there's science, there is communication about science, and then there is a science about the communication of science. Right?
Yes.
The science of science communication.
Yes.
And it is through that research that demonstrates that attempts to communicate science through the deficit model actually cause more detriment than producing fruitful and good conversations, productive conversations. Because once people have their ideas challenged with facts from a maybe not reliable source that has a topspin of attitude, then you've essentially set yourself up for an environment of obstinance. You know what I mean?
Well,
Yeah.
and that's the backfire effect, I think, is what you're.
Yes.
Yes. So what's going to
And
happen?
they use, and I was talking to ProLib about this last week, and when teaching about this, they use a political example of people. Let's see, people who are left leaning or right leaning reading something that opposes what they believe. And what it does to their position, and it doesn't change their position, right? Even if they had an incorrect assumption and they're being corrected by this factual piece, they just dig in just a little bit harder, and that's the backlash effect. It's like, how dare you challenge me? No, you're wrong. Not only are you wrong in what you're saying, you're wrong in challenging me. You know what I mean?
Well,
so
and
it's like a 1-2 punch of ego insult.
Right, and the research on that of the neuroscience behind it is the fight or flight response that happens in the brain when somebody's confronted with something that counteracts what they already believe, if it's a deeply held belief. So most people, I think the research showed that, or suggested that that most people wouldn't fall prey to the backfire effect, but people who have a deeply held belief and tie it to their identity will react to an opposing fact about the issue by a fight or flight response. And it's like the same reaction in the brain that you would get if your life was in danger. So that's what's really interesting, is that it's an attack on an idea, but if you tie it to your identity as a political ideology, as a religious ideology, then those things will feel like you're being physically attacked, and that you have to reject the idea or sink in or run away from it. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. So that is absolutely true. The more somebody has invested in a belief, right? And a belief to us might be like trivial, like, oh, you believe that? Oh, let me correct that, right? To us, what is
so
trivial is you're guilty as charged. There's a better way to approach it, and that's what the science of science communication is showing, is that approach of like, that doesn't make any sense, like, let me correct it, when that thing that you're trying to dismiss like so many flies is actually a deeply held belief, or an extension or a manifestation of a deeply held belief. You're the one who comes off looking like the ass. And it's not about not coming off looking like the ass. It's about communication, right? So if your goal is to reach that person, it might be worth knowing what they believe first, steel manning their position, and understanding why that's so important to them. Because you might not want to, for the sake of the conversation, that might not be the conversation where you want to persuade them otherwise. It might be the conversation where you make the connection to have more conversations later about deeper stuff. And which do you think is going to be more effective? The poning culture of just like, pow, you're wrong, I'm right, and I just memed you, into oblivion. Or I eviscerated you, whatever the HuffPost, verbs are. I eviscerated you with my ponage, whatever. That whole culture, that's not going to get you towards the communication goal as well as a softer touch. But I wanted to get back to a point that Nick had made while addressing that, because that's a good point. So the correlation causation thing. I mean, we're so guilty of it. You know, we use it in casual conversation. Just the idea that, oh, this causes that. Oh, studies have shown this. This proves that. Just in colloquial conversation, you know, like it's almost accepted. But that's also part of the problem, because colloquial definitions of things like proof, evidence, theories, hypotheses, you know, just simple things like that are radically different. So understanding, once again, time and place. When you're talking in a context where you don't have to be super strict about things, you can throw around the idea that you have theories about how things work without them really being theories. They're really hypotheses, right? But when trying to communicate science, I think it's worth making clear that you understand that this correlation has been shown. That in no way shows that one caused the other, because we don't know which one caused the other. Did A cause B or did B cause A? And we also don't know if there is a third factor that's contributing to both of those. So, you know, like all these correlation is not causation examples that exist on all of those web pages. That's just those are silly examples, but there are everyday examples in every science article written, right? Alcohol proven to be effective. Alcohol not harmful.
Yep.
Caffeine good for X, Y, or Z. You know, just like pick your. I mean, whether if it's not alcohol or caffeine or
chocolate was
CBD.
Chocolate's a big one, because there was a strong correlation between, of course, depression and eating chocolate. And so they said, oh, that's it. Chocolate must cause depression.
Cause.
That's the conclusion that you see that was drawn by laymen from a study, that there's a high correlation between depression and eating chocolate.
But I also want to make something clear, like those kind of nutritional studies that come out, the more attention grabbing versions of them are the ones that make it to news sources. And sometimes those articles aren't published in very well redeemed journals. Like they're not high impact factor, but they have a sexy title. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
So like, I guess to be an informed consumer, which is like a goal, right? Like to just raise scientific literacy so that people kind of get where they should apply these techniques, like the correlation causation thing. Like, yes, when you're listening to nutrition information, just put it in a category of ever changing. It's always going to change. Next week it's going to be a completely different thing, but it's still the same soap opera. It's always the same 5 actors, and they're just switching whether they're good or bad this week. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just put it in that category. When applying it to things that like actually matter, stay true to the fact that correlation does not mean causation. It can be a predictor. It can be used for predictive purposes in certain modeling situations, but that's best left to statisticians that do the modeling. So it really comes down to, who do you consider to be a reliable source? Because those are the people that you should listen to. Unless, of course, your reliable sources suck. Right?
Yeah.
Which goes back to my point of a higher scientific literacy for the population kind of obviates that. They understand that, okay, a reliable source is somebody who puts forth information that is valid and reliable. When they make a mistake, they make corrections in their articles, simple things like that. Like, yep, it's imperfect, done by humans, makes mistakes, makes minimal mistakes. Can be corroborated, can be validated. Like this information isn't like living in the ethers of this specific corner of anywhere. It's like you can sink your teeth into it, It doesn't come down to globalists, to put a fucking, pardon my language, Alex Jones spin on everything.
So Mr. Shadow Kitty has said, and this is one of the ones I like, that, and of course this is true. It's mostly true. Statistics demonstrate that if you eat ice cream, you're at a greater risk for shark attack. which there is a correlation between eating ice cream and shark attacks.
Indeed.
Which, and I do, when I taught, that was one of my favorite ones to bring up. I'd say, okay, I can tell you roughly how much ice cream was sold when you tell me how many people died in the country, because that's also correlated. So the greater the number of deaths in the U.S. usually
my favorite
is correlated with it. Now with COVID, it's not. It's not. But,
my favorite in class was consumption of mozzarella cheese and awarding of graduate degrees in civil engineering.
Oh,
So
really?
I was like, okay, everybody, we know what we need to do, right? More civil engineers. We need more people with graduate degrees in civil engineering. Let's eat as much mozzarella as possible. Let's get eaten on calzones, make some strombolis. Let's go.
Well, one of the other ones that got me, and it's really the same thing. It's not new, but it's an interesting. So in the 70s, it was discovered that there are processes which are cooling the Earth. They also knew that there were processes that were warming the Earth. They already knew that, but they discovered other processes that were actually cooling the Earth. And so they said, okay, we have now discovered these cooling processes. And the big question was, we know that two different competing processes exist. Usually they're in homeostasis, but which one is changing faster? And nobody knew. And about 10 years later, they said, okay, it's the warming process. And when they came out with that, they said, oh, now they're saying it's warming, even though 10 years ago they said that there was a cooling process and we're going to call. That's not what they said. But that led to one of, I think, three major miscommunications in regards to global warming. The first was when they found that there was, in fact, a competing cooling process. They said there is a cooling process. And they said, oh, the science came, not science, the news came out and said, okay, the Earth is getting colder. It's like, that's not what they said. Then it comes out with, okay, global warming. Well, if it's global warming, why are these areas in the country or on the planet getting colder? So obviously, again, science must be wrong because, that it's not getting warmer here. I just saw a snowflake outside. And thanks to members of
and it's
Congress,
night right. It's a night right now. So that means it's global nightening.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Oh, no.
Global darkening.
Global darkening, yeah.
It's dark by me right now.
And some members of Congress brought snowballs into Congress as proof that global warming isn't a thing.
But I do want to take this opportunity to kind of pivot away from global warming, because that is a good example of people just not trusting experts towards today, the pandemic that we're in right now.
Yes.
I think that one of the biggest mistakes in science communication that's happening right now is that there isn't a daily briefing from the experts, CDC, NIH. And in the absence of that, the scientific community just coming together to do their own. Like Zoom works, Google Hangouts work. Or maybe not Google. I mean, I'm showing my age. YouTube.
Hey, you're connected through Google Hangouts, so clearly it really doesn't work.
All right.
At
Good.
any rate,
Good.
It doesn't work when it's done on in time. But please continue.
I mean, I absolutely think that is a failing that's happening, and also the idea that the information that's being put out is final. And misunderstanding the point that the point that I was making earlier, that science is self-correcting. We expect it to change over time. This is, especially if it's ongoing, like the fact that we had peer-reviewed scientific journals being published in real time of the pandemic they were doing research on is thank you, science. That's the appropriate response. Thank you. You're astoundingly nimble right now. But if you don't expect science to be nimble, if you don't expect to live in a world of uncertainty where there are error bars around the mean and that variance allows wiggle room, if you're not used to that way of thinking, this is just gobbledygook handed down from the, like, what's the example I give? The oracles on Delphi. You know what I mean? It just sounds like you're just talking right down to us.
Yeah.
In a way that I just don't want to, you with your Jersey Italian accent, you don't know from nothing. You probably have smooth hands, no calluses on your fingers. Who are you to tell me?
Right.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything about it just smacks of condescension. And if the point is to connect, then you need to at least reach out, science community. I'm looking at you, science community. If I had your number, I'd call you, science community.
Well, so in that particular, tying in the advice you had at the beginning with the example that we just gave, what are ways that right now, say, Anthony Fauci or other people who do have a platform, and there has to be more of a platform. I mean, Trump is not very big on communication. He's shut down the daily briefings. I mean, he doesn't,
Yeah.
No. But how could the NIH, CDC right now be communicating this better so that people understood some basic concepts, A, of how bad this is and can get, and B, that we're not necessarily facing that choice between, the economy and life, and try to have a rational discussion on that. What would you advise?
Oh, that daily. They need daily. It needs to last about an hour, and it needs to be absolutely honest. Here's exactly what's going on in all of the states. Here are the ones that are going down. Here are the ones that are going up. Here's the ones that are going up at a dangerous rate that we should be paying attention to on the daily. Because without it being on the daily, everybody just gets a false sense of security. They just fall into a lull of just like, oh, everything's okay. Oh, they're not reporting it as often. No, that's not the case. Nothing has changed. Like, my wife and I have frequent conversations about this. It's blowing our mind that people are behaving like everything's okay based on, and let's face it, only their wish fulfillment that everything is okay, that they can behave like everything is okay. And that they don't get that is killing me. I got a text message the other day from somebody who wanted to like get together and jam and have a beer. And I was like, not for nothing, dude. Like, I was that guy. I was like, not for nothing. We're a little more conservative on our rollout of coming out of the house. Like, when everything's copacetic, I'll give you a call. But like, it's not good. It's not cool to be doing that shit. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, it makes me anxious talking about it a little too much, right? But to answer your question, that anxiety that I feel has to be felt by other people. And I think that a way to allay that fear and anxiousness is to just be a straight shooter with the public. Just be like, here's what's happening, right? Here's how much testing we are doing. Here's how much more we need. Here's how things are going. We could do better. I mean, just like simple reassurances like that. Like Cuomo. Not many people like Cuomo. When he was giving his daily jams, he was like a rock star. I remember John Oliver being like, "God, he's doing so great. I can't wait to not like him again." Right?
Yes. And then, as I recall, he found a way to not like him again real quick.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he screws up soon enough. I mean, let's face it. He's just an imperfect human like the rest of us, right? But at least that was reassuring because he was just like, yeah, come on. You have to follow these. These are the rules. Nothing has changed.
Yep.
Nothing has changed. Nothing. And because nothing has changed, nothing should change about how you behave. These, the masks, the social distancing, the washing of the hands. Wash them even if you don't think you need to. Just get in the habit of washing your hands 6 to 10 times a day. Just do it. Just do it. Right? So anyway. So that would absolutely be helpful. And I think that Fauci has his hands a little bit more tied, although I think that he is ballsy as fuck in his interviews where he just like says the exact opposite. And I think there was 1 or 2 times where he said it in front of Trump, like feet away from him. Like, nope, that's not we are definitely going to see COVID in the fall. Like,
oh my God.
Trump was like, yeah, I think it's going to go away. I mean, hey. It's like weird hand movements.
Like Fonz.
His face when Trump said, and you can. I think there's a meme of this when Trump said,
face palm.
Yeah. It's just like I can't believe it. He's laughing. It's not that he's ashamed. He's just like, oh God, this guy is such an idiot. I mean, you can tell.
Oh my God.
What are we doing?
Oh no.
But
and what's scary is, we've talked about this before, but what's so scary about it is that it really has consequences. There are people who listen to this man over any other person that would call themselves an expert or would be an expert. he's trusted by a huge subset of the population to be almost the only vessel of truth. And the only reason people think that is because that's the rhetoric that he puts out, that he's the only one that can be trusted. And so it's so scary that he's not just reiterating what experts are saying or pointing to experts and saying, you know, these are the people we should be listening to. If he did that, then at least his base would, like, you know, take seriously what the CDC does put out there.
And that's, yeah, it's very difficult to maintain the trust of the public when your job is so complicated that that you can talk about it in a way that everyone can really sink their teeth into, right? Without that level of connection between, like, this and this is why it's important to you. Without that personal connection, it's just, like I said, the oracles from Delphi handing down knowledge that you have to listen to. Right? It's just, you have to keep in mind, regardless of how good you are at encoding information, you have to account for, and here's where the psychology bits come in, the way that people decode information. Because even if you are perfect in your delivery, you're talking to somebody that has expectations that can be shaped on their confirmation biases, right? So I happen to have a chapter open right now in a book that is about the science of science communication. It's the Oxford Handbook of, let's see if I can get it without the glare. There it is.
Very cool.
Right, yep.
So it's the final chapter, and the final chapter is on the section about communicating science in a turbulent political environment. And this was published like 10 years ago. I couldn't think of anything more appropriate. And it says that the things that are going to influence science communication are the phenomena of selection, which is, like, you know, our ability to frame things. And another is the phenomena of reasoning, which is understanding that there are confirmation biases and heuristics inherent in the people that we're talking to. And instead of trying to meet them head on, like, whatever you resist persists. It's not you're not going to, you know what illusions are, right? Like visual illusions. You know how, like, when you're told what the illusion is, it doesn't go away.
Right.
That's what cognitive biases are. They're cognitive illusions. So that even if you tell somebody that we all suffer from this thing, it doesn't prevent you or that person from suffering from that thing, knowing that we all suffer from that thing. So that's why calling it a cognitive illusion for me is like such a perfectly delicious metaphor, because it's just like, you can tell people, like, no, you're committing your confirmation bias, disconfirmation bias, familiarity bias. You can just throw the litany of biases at them, and it's just going to be like, what? Like, you still don't make sense to me.
Right.
That's not, you're not changing anything. So, but you do have to account for, so instead of trying to hit it head on, you develop ways of getting around it, understanding that they exist, overcoming the obstacles instead of trying to move them, so to speak. And I think that ties into what I had said earlier. The only way you're going to do that is if you open up a line of communication where you can start to get to know somebody and connect. And it's that connection where you're understanding where they're coming from and they're feeling heard where they're coming from genuinely, because you're genuinely listening, that they're willing to take on a new position or just be honest about where they're coming from in a way that, you know, their bumper sticker phrases don't capture. So, and then the final, let me see, there was one more thing. There was the phenomena of selection, the phenomena of reasoning. No, those were the main two. So it was the way that you put it out there, the way that you encode it, and the way that you understand how people are going to decode it.
Well, let me. There's some activity in the live chat here. So first of all, Holy Spackle 199. Give me liberty or give me death. Yeah, No, I think that was actually that's kind of my kind of humor, which is a little scary. That was I think it's a commentary on but people are choosing death. At any rate, thank you for the super chat, Holy Spackle.
Oh,
Also, Dragnot Silvas has shown up, and in fact, I think his ears were burning because we had mentioned him earlier, and he had asked. We actually
I'm
already
always
covered.
talking about drag.
Yeah, we had he wanted to. Well, we did discuss this earlier, but he did want to make sure that we had hit the deficit model when approaching someone with cognitive bias. So, thank you, Drag. We actually did cover that. I think we may get back into it. I have another.
And I think I
question.
did. I think I spoke about it a little bit last week with ProLib, but I just touched on it towards the end. I think that the way that we addressed it in this hangout, that was a better, more fun unpacking of the topic of the deficit model. Just like, just driving the point home, almost like almost going against the deficit model to your viewing and listening audience. Like, let me just drive this point home. In a way that you should not drive the point home.
Right. Well, and that's a very good point for science communication, but also for engaging with religious ideas as a non-believer, because we've talked about this with Matt Dillahunty and with other people about the importance of not talking at someone and not talking to them about something that they don't believe. So you kind of have to listen and take in what they're actually communicating to you and show respect of that you are listening and you are taking what they're saying seriously. So that's a really good point for general communication, but especially for our atheist viewers who, engage with these ideas and things. So,
But I think it points towards something deeper, right? If you're able to straw man, let me rephrase that, steel man. If you're able to steel man somebody's argument to them, you have completely changed the tone of the conversation. Because in that one move, you're demonstrating that you are genuine, that you are listening, that you're willing to use value neutral terms for things that the both of you know you disagree about, right? So just engaging in that behavior, and I'm not a debater, like I'm not, that's not my groove, but I do think that, atheism needs its bulldogs. It's just not me. But even, in debate or not in debate, if you can demonstrate that you're genuinely listening and you're not in it to wait until they're done talking so that you can, like, oh, I have this point I want to make, I have a point I want to make, please stop talking, I have a point I want to make. Yeah, but like that move, just like, oh, dude, it's so obvious, please. You're killing me with this. So, so long as you can demonstrate that you're being genuine, I think that's the start. Like all of this whole textbook doesn't matter if you know everything in it. It's not a textbook, it's a handbook. It doesn't matter if you know everything in it if you're coming at it from a place of bad faith. Like you have to genuinely want to communicate the thing that you want to communicate, if you're a science communicator, in a way that you genuinely want to give a shit about the people you're communicating it to. And I think that's the piece that's kind of missing. Right? Because a lot of awesome scientists suck at science communication, suck at it, like just horror shows, especially ones that don't test humans. I mean, come on. Researchers who test animals don't interact with humans for a reason. I mean, it's that's a self-selected group. I'm happy to go public with that statement. I'll tell you what. And them describing what they do and what the value is to humans is like listening to a 4-year-old. Like, onions are all I eat. Like, what? What the hell are you talking about?
I know. Well, and I've even had professors who did research. I had a neuroscience professor that, was a brilliant researcher, but in the class that we took for methods for her, it was really difficult for most of us to get her to come off of what she was getting at to put it into layman's terms so that we could get to where she was at. It was really hard for her to you know, get the
Downshift.
baseline.
Downshift.
Yeah.
Just downshift. Come on. There's a way that you can talk about this that doesn't need, quadrisyllabic words.
Right. And it was really hard to get her to understand that, that she was not really communicating that to somebody who didn't already know the information. So yeah.
It's become now, I'm a bit, I'm an introvert. I like to just sort of, I prefer to just sort of hang on my own, but I end up having to go to a lot of parties. My wife wants to go to a party. I end up having to go because I'm the translator. She's got a PhD in biochemistry, and she is an X-ray crystallographer. And so somebody will say, "What do you do?" And she'll say, "Well, this is what I do." And she talks about X-ray crystallography, and invariably I just sit and wait. And when they're done, like, I have no idea what you just said. And I said, she takes pictures of molecules using X-rays. That's what she does. She takes pictures of molecules using X-rays. Like, oh, okay. It's like, how's that? She was like, yeah, that. She still hasn't learned to say it. I was like, just copy that. I've said that enough, but I still have to go to be the translator. I'm doing rational drug design, and here's what that is. Just like, okay, yeah, okay. But brilliant, but yeah, needs a translator.
That's one of the reasons why, when people ask what I do, like normally when I'm not a guest on a online show, like at a dinner party, what do you do, Chris? Oh, I manage a lab. Try to leave it super vague. Oh, what kind of lab do you manage? Oh, it's a experimental psychology lab. Oh, what do you study? I study the psychology of smell. That's all I need to say. I'm answering questions for the rest of the night.
Oh no!
Everybody has an avenue into a facet of that diamond that is like your personal experience with smell, right? Because like everyone, like, oh, pheromones. What do you think about that? What about aromatherapy? What about this? And what about that? And it's fun because it just so happens that the lab that I work in is ripe for science communication. I get to correct people about, like the confusion between flavor and taste and smell and how flavor is mostly smell. And when you are congested and you say nothing tastes the same, actually everything tastes exactly the same. It just doesn't have the same flavor because all of the odor molecules are being blocked retronasally from getting to your receptors, yada, yada, right? Like this is like right in my wheelhouse for communication. Yeah. But obviously there are other areas that are not my wheelhouse that still chat my ass when I see them being poorly communicated. And I think that's, I'm going to bring it right back to the current situation. That's the part of the current COVID situation. I think that science communicators should be doing a better job. Like before we went live, Bill Nye, you mentioned him. Where the fuck is he?
Yeah.
And also I want to readily admit, maybe he's all over this, but I don't do social media. So maybe he's all over the Twitter sphere,
right?
Twitting,
yeah, I don't know.
Whatever it is. And I'm just unaware of it.
I'm not on it either.
You would think that like if he had a heavy presence in getting the word out of what the CDC was saying, you think it would be all over the news. CNN would be doing specials about it. Or Neil deGrasse Tyson. I understand that he's an astrophysicist, but he speaks about topics that have nothing to do with astrophysics all the time.
Right.
So even just like a nudge, even just like yep, okay, do what you're told. Not do what you're told. I mean, I'm
listen to the experts.
My own problem, right?
Listen to
the reliable sources.
Yeah.
Just listen to the reliable sources. See, I'm guilty as charged, right? It's just like it gets so frustrating. It's just like, let's just do the fucking right thing.
Yeah. Just listen to me. Yeah. And that's what's really frustrating is I think, normally with most topics around science, we live in a world where the biggest consequence is somebody misunderstands it and it affects them in a personal way. It might affect their health. It might affect, the way that they engage with specific people. But in the current circumstance, a distrust and a misunderstanding of science is affecting large masses of people based on individual decisions that are being made. So that's what's really important about it right now.
I don't mean to interrupt, but it's even beyond that. It's like when I go to the grocery store and I see somebody without a mask, Am I really prepared to be that guy?
Yeah.
Like, where's your mask? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? Right? Because I have friends that are that person, and they have stories. And it's like, oh man.
Matt Dillahunty, when he was here, told us a story because I think he was at a gas station, and he didn't even say anything, but it was the look, and they knew right away. And somebody didn't have a mask. Dillahunty just looked at him cross-eyed, and the guy's like, "What? You got a problem?" He's like, well, "Yeah, you don't have a mask on, dude." And I guess they followed him. He had to call the police. They got behind him, and he was in his truck, and it was
Yeah.
yeah.
That's exactly what I don't want. Some asshole following me home,
Yeah.
with my kids.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a mess. But so like it brings it to reality, because it's like I want everyone to want to do the right thing, to understand that this is the right thing, that there is no second wave. We are still in the process of the first wave. It's just that the overall data is skewed because New York is going down while the rest of the country is going up. I want people to be explaining that every fucking day. I want every day for there to be somebody just being like, and here's what the data looks like and why. Just that. And I'm looking in the side chat, and Amorose Moon is saying that the WHO and CDC have streams on YouTube. So that's, I couldn't ask for more than that, other than that those YouTube streams were way more popular.
Yeah.
And again, I'll really admit that maybe they're more popular than I think they are, but they're just not on my radar.
I do want to say this about the mask, because that's another example of miseducation. The number of people who think that the masks are to protect themselves, like, oh, if I put on the mask, I'm protecting myself, and it's I
hear that all the time.
It's all the time. And well, gee, if I want to take the risk, I can. You know what? You're absolutely right. Actually, if you want to take the risk, if you want to be an idiot, it's a free country. Go. You do you, boo. But that's not what the mask is for. It's not to help you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like flipping like the double bird at everybody. Like, I could be an asymptomatic vector. Nobody'll know. Cough, cough. Like, what are you doing, man? Like this. Oh, yeah, that kills me. That misunderstanding is particularly frustrating, because my wife and I have protocols. She works in the healthcare industry, and so like we have we have the hygiene in, hygiene out mentality. Right? When we're in the car, hand sanitizer, mask, and then we go to the store. When we come back, hand sanitizer, then we take the mask off, right? So, and then we get in the house, there's a protocol before we can, when she gets home from work, so we're very protocol oriented. And maybe that's just a demonstration that we're uptight as fuck. And, like our frustration with everybody else is just a symptom of us being too uptight.
I don't think so.
Did you guys hear that?
No, what'd you say?
I love you so much. So I don't think so either.
You gotta tell us. Hey, you're talking behind our backs, dude. You know how rude that you gotta tell us now.
No.
Whatever this is, you are contractually required. What is?
Oh no.
Oh my God. That was fantastic. Yeah, so I don't think I'm being too paranoid either, but I just kind of want to leave that a little wiggle room. Yeah. So the fact that we're so protocol oriented, that makes it more frustrating that people are just so like walking through a grocery store without a mask. Like, what are you doing?
Last time I was at the grocery store, it was at least a third didn't have masks. Usually, 25 or younger is one of the things I've noticed, and I think they really do. They think they're invulnerable. They think they're, so I do get it, but it's still.
And I think that's also part of the miscommunication. I think that people, one of the biases is that there's an anchoring bias. So like one of the first pieces of evidence about COVID was that it wasn't so effective on kids or people below, 30 or 40. That the statistics have changed on that. Has not changed the opinion of the people that matter, which is that exact demographic, right? This is an example of I guess you could call it the primacy effect. And the primacy effect would be more appropriate to like memorizing word lists. So like in a list of words, a primacy effect is that you remember the first word and the last word being the recency effect.
Right.
And it's like they're anchored in the primacy effect in a way that they're just not paying attention to, like, no, you are also a vector for this disease that could cause hella damage.
Yep.
That they don't get that, it, to me, is just like, it feels, my frustration is that it doesn't feel like it's a priority to keep people updated that nothing has changed, right? As far as the virus's ability to infect and the increasing number of cases of people it is infecting successfully, right? There's not enough information about that being a reality alongside the reports of beaches opening and barbershops opening and I don't know.
Well,
that's a combination. I'll admit that's mostly commentary, right? Like I have science communication leanings, but that's like, you know, Chris's kind of soapbox opinion about what's happening right now. But I also think that because the topics of the show, it's relevant to bring those up.
Absolutely.
And also, it feels fantastic to just get it off my chest.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and it's important. It's very important.
Well, and you know, it's at least we can try to communicate something. I think that's the sort of the goal. So we're gonna start wrapping it up soon, maybe in about 10 or 15 minutes. Try to be done. I did want to ask you. I don't know if there are any other biases in particular that you thought were a problem, but you had mentioned wish thinking, and so I was wondering if you could maybe explain for us what is wish thinking and how does it work here. I think you gave a pretty good example, but in my view, that's actually a reasonably big one too. We talked about the backfire effect and the wish thinking. I thought maybe we could touch on a bit.
Well, like wishful thinking in the context that I was using it, I think was the idea that, you know, like you want something to be the case so bad that you just pretend that it is, right? So it's the fake it till you make it mentality, right? It's wishful thinking in that I'm going to behave like it's normal because I'm super hopeful that things are totally normal. And if in a few weeks, it turns out that like nothing of consequence has happened, I'm validated in thinking that I did the right thing and that everything is normal, right? That's wishful thinking. We're not there yet. We don't get to engage in that kind of statistical projections, right? Again, if you want to deal with models that are predictive about how this is going to affect the population, which is a chaotic system, but it happens to be there's two kinds of chaos systems, ones that you cannot influence and ones that you can. And the behaviors of things like the stock market is the type of, not that this is the stock market, but it's analogous. This is a chaotic system that you can change. You can provide information that changes the way this chaotic system moves. And there are trends that you can project. But as I mentioned earlier, leave that in the hands of the people who do that and trust the ones that do. I guess that's the hardest problem. You know, living in a country that has such a pick yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, it makes it difficult for people to, how can I put it, in someone else about what's good for them.
Yeah.
They immediately have a reflexive, intuitive, knee-jerk reaction against it, resistance to it, and then it fits whatever ideology they have that justifies why that shouldn't be happening to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of a problem. That's something that I don't see in this textbook as something that I know how to overcome. Like, I don't know how to get through to those people. So I'm going to hope that they are the minority of people and that the majority of people that I disagree with are open to the kinds of conversations where I can be persuaded by why they're at the place that they are. And maybe they can be persuaded that I understand things differently. And I think that's going to be the best way that we move forward with science communication, whether we're in a pandemic or not.
Yeah. And there's one more like interesting phenomenon, and I don't know how prevalent it is, but there's a sense at least in the US, that people have like the truth and then they have like personal truth. They have like things that are are true to them, and um, I don't know how much that translates to things like public health, because or even just personal health, because I think it depends on the person whether they believe that well, that doesn't sound right, so that I'm not going to believe that kind of thing, even if it's something that a doctor tells them, right? And I think that there's a level of importance of the information that people will trust the expert anyway, and they'll kind of you know partition that off as like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to the doctor in this instance, but in this other one, I'm not. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's something that's too prevalent in general. If like there's a certain level of danger that people will still, listen to people they need to listen to for, and not just say like, well, that's not my truth, so I'm just going to ignore it.
2 points. So as I mentioned, my wife works in the healthcare industry. So one of the themes of her vents coming home is that people are dismissive of the advice given to them by the experts that are the doctors, that are doling out this information to. They are coming to doctors to dismiss the information they get from them. Like what?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so this phenomenon of the dismissal of like, well, oh, you're back here for the third time. Like, oh, did you do this thing that we asked? No. Did you take the medicine we asked? No. Did you do the physical therapy that we asked? No. And you wonder why it still hurts? Like this common dismissal of what they actually need to do based on evidence-based research, right? Mm. That's one component. And then there was another component that you hit on that I wanted to touch on. I can't remember. Do you remember?
It's like anecdotal
of what you left off.
Anecdotal dismissal of things. Well, just that there's a level of gravity of the situation where people will abandon that.
Okay,
and
thank you. Perfect.
And actually
perfectly triggered what I wanted to say.
Cool.
So there is a phenomenon where like even when it's not between categories of extremity, right? Where it's like a common cold versus cancer. Mm-hmm. Right. Even in levels of cancer, when the odds are a little bit less risky, people are more willing to engage in complementary and alternative medicines. But even within the category of cancer, when it gets to a point, they're like, okay, fuck being a dirty granola hippie. Give me the chemo. Like, let's attack. Let me talk to the specialists that know how to blast this into outer space, and let's get this the fuck done. Right. But they only think that when they are pushed to that level, because of a phenomenon called ideational versus instrumental thinking that would take a little bit too long to unpack right now, but I would love to come back and shoot the shit with you more.
Yeah.
I would definitely love to have you.
Yeah.
Well, and you've come to at least one of our after shows. We're going to have a few more, so I'll make sure you get the link to those when we do those, because we certainly enjoy having you on. So was there anything you wanted to wrap up with before we go?
No. Think of somebody that means a lot to you, and think of ways that you can be a better person for them.
I can't think of no. I think that's spectacular. Well, thank you very much. We will be. I think we're going to do a news update. We decided to not do that for the show, so we're going to do a news update. He's not actually going to be doing overtime. The overtime is going to be doing the news. But you know what? I will be in the Discord immediately after this if he wants to come join me in our Discord and hang and chat with people for a little while. You'll see we've been dropping links to the Discord. We'll drop another one in a minute. So anyone who wants to come in, I'll be there. I'm sure I can convince Chris to come join us for at least a little while in the Discord.
I can hang for about 20-30 minutes.
Perfect. And then in about, I'm thinking 90 minutes to 2 hours, we will do overtime, and we will, we're going to cover sort of what's been going on in the news. And then we have next week, we're going to have on, I think, Landon Knoll on civics. We're going to continue that series. We're going to have him discussing the U.S. Supreme Court. We're gonna have a sort of a panel. I know. We're going to have a panel discussion. We're trying to get it scheduled now. It's going to be on philosophy of science with Osmandius and Richard Carrier. And then we're also,
Hey.
yeah, I know, he's been on a lot, which is always good to have him. And then we're going to have on is Andring to have a discussion on gun control. We'll discuss that a bit more as that gets closer, but I'm looking forward to that one. Very bright guy, pro Second Amendment. We've had a lot of discussions on it. He was there for the original in time debate that we had on gun control, and we've been basically trying to book him since then. He is a trucker, so he's been a little busy, but we're going to have him on and discuss that. But other than that, I thank you, Holy Spackle, again for that super chat. Thank you all for showing up. Thank you, Christopher, for coming. Courtney, thank you very much. Good to see you. And look forward to, we'll catch you guys on the Discord. I'll be there in just a couple minutes. And other than that, thank you all for joining us. I'll probably see you guys in about 90 minutes to an hour. Sorry, 90 minutes to 2 hours. All right. Thank you all.